Okay. My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Ralph Mills, who is 100 years and 8 months young. Ralph worked for the Iowa Highway Commission, the Milwaukee Railroad, and 30 years as a civil engineer for the city of Marion. Ralph, tell us when and where you were born.
I was born at LeGrand, Iowa. That's a village about halfway between Tama and Marshalltown. And it was 1902. My birth date was January the 2nd.
Was it a blistery day? What type of a day was it, Ralph?
Well, as I think I have mentioned in one of my books, I was there, but I don't remember it.
What was your parents' names?
My father was Dr. Ernest Manning Mills, a country doctor, and my mother was Anna Burgess Mills. She was born and raised. My father was born in Washington County, Iowa, and I have the dates of it. It was 1848, maybe along in there.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother was born in Illinois, not far from, well, there's a little mining town of Kangley.
Mm-hmm. What nationality was the Mills family that...
They were, the story we used to hear as a kid was that our predecessor that led us to this continent was Peter van der Meulen, a Dutch sea captain. Meulen, the en suffix is plural, mm-hmm. and of course they shortened it down to singular Mills, mm-hmm. or put it Mills. Yeah. Anyway, that's the story we got as kids.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any brothers and sisters, Ralph?
I had 4 brothers and 4 sisters. I had 2 brothers older, 2 sisters older, 2 brothers younger, 2 sisters younger.
So you were quite in the
middle.
I
was a pivot man.
You said your dad's he was a doctor. What did doctors get paid back then? Did they get paid with chickens and
yes,
and produce?
Produce, anything from the farm, including lots of firewood. The farmers along the river had timber. They'd cut it up, buzz it up, bring it in, and it was up to us boys to axe it, to split it up and store it in the wood house.
Was this the horse and buggy days?
It was definitely horse and buggy. Cars were unknown in that early time.
Did your dad, I assumed he made a lot of house calls with the horse and the buggy?
There were lots of farm calls, and there was a time in my early youth when I was the horseman. I had charge of the team. I had to keep the stables clean, and I had to feed them their hay and their oats. And a call would come for a country call. I'd be the one that had to run to the barn, harness the horses, hitch them to the buggy, drive them around to the front of the office, and get ready for Dad to jump in, and away we would go.
Do you remember any nasty storms that your dad got called out in?
Oh, yes, a number. Wintertime was a trial. Would you like to hear about a baby case that I went with Dad on?
Yes.
He would almost never take me on a baby case, which in our family was called a $10 case. It was dead of winter. The snowdrifts were high and the frozen, and we had a tough time getting to this farmhouse over north of the river, but we finally made it, and in time. The farmer and his wife had a single daughter who was pregnant, was having her baby. In those days, that was a calamity in anybody's home. And the farmer sat me behind, sort of to the side of the stove in the kitchen, with my back to the wall, and he and I visited while Dad was busy, for a couple of hours, I presume. the farmer's wife and a neighbor lady would once in a while come in to get some hot water or some needed stuff. Finally, Dad came back out. He had done his work. And he asked the farmer and his wife if they would like to sit at the kitchen table for a minute. And he sat with them. And he said, "Do you know, it's almost about 1900 years ago, there was a poor country girl who had a child out of wedlock. That baby grew up to a man who is known the world around. He's one of the most wonderful people who ever lived." He didn't mention who he was talking about. He didn't have to. Well, he finished his coffee and away we went back home. I've often wondered what happened to that baby, and what a wonderful thing to give as a part of the $10 bill that we got paid for.
He must have put those folks at ease. That
he was trying to make it better for them, and a way for the boy.
Yeah.
I guess that's that story.
Did you ever think back over the years how your dad cured so many illnesses with just that little black bag that he carried around? Nowadays you have prescription drugs from no end to them. He did it with a little black bag.
He did it with psychology and with his little medicine case.
Did he find himself patching up his children very much?
Oh, yes, indeed. Every one of us. My sister Marjorie fell off the swing and broke her arm. He said that. My brother Harlow fell off a bag swing and bit his tongue off. He sewed that back on with catgut.
Did all 9 of you live at home at one time, all 9 children?
I think not. Yeah, well, we did too, because our bedroom, the boys' bedroom, there were 2 bedrooms upstairs, one girls and one boys, and the front bedroom was a little larger, and there were 5 of us, and we were 5 at a time. And a cold winter night, it was awful good snuggling.
Your dad was on duty 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, wasn't he?
Yes.
Nowadays they'd call it 24/7. Yeah.
Yes, there was no limit.
And I imagine you had a party line, a telephone.
We had 2 telephones. One was called the country line, and that was in the living room. And then my dad had an office, a separate building, just a few yards from our house, and there was that office building had a phone that was tied to one in our house, living room. So my sister Sula tried to listen in on when my brother Max was calling his girlfriend.
Was your dad, was his more or less a private line that?
No.
There was no private lines then?
No, this was, could I illustrate or demonstrate? The office was in view of the city square. On the other side of the square, in plain view of the office, was the central office. The gal that operated the switchboard at the central office could see what was going on at the Mills place. And she did a lot of my dad's connections. If somebody called him, well, he just left, so he'll probably be back in a half hour. And she was really pretty good. But my mother was a 24-hour telephone connector.
With all of you boys in the family, did you hunt or fish?
We surely did.
Did you put a lot of meat on the table by hunting?
That's right. Fowls in season, geese and ducks when we could. Rabbits all the time. In the wintertime was food. But we kept the meat on the table, really, hunting.
Was there much game then? Was there any pheasants then?
No. Pheasants were not. Prairie chickens were just going out.
Deer?
No deer. They
Turkeys.
were coming in.
Turkeys?
But there were lots of fox, wolves, and beavers. No beavers yet. They brought those in, and otters they brought in. But there were all kinds of fish in the river. There were muskrats galore. They were valuable. We could sell them to the furrier.
Did you ever eat muskrat?
No. I could tell you a little bit about musk. No, let's see.
No.
I better save that.
Okay. Electricity. You didn't have electricity when
No
you were a young
electricity.
kid?
In the living room, we had a center table in the middle of the heating stove out here at the wall, center table, and we had what they called an Aladdin lamp. It burned
With a mantle.
And you had to pump it up. I guess it was gasoline, and it gave a very bright and a brilliant light, but it was almost every 15 minutes and every evening, the kids scattered around the floor doing their homework. Hey, you're in my light.
Yeah. Summertime, I can imagine that was a fun time for the boys and the whole family.
It was vacation time. We would trap gophers for a bounty, 10 cents a pair of. We'd cut the front feet off. And you should have seen the county auditor when we brought those stinking feet in there. He kept them as far away as he could get from them, and the sooner he got rid of us, the better.
That was good income, wasn't it?
10 cents a piece was very good.
Because there was probably a lot of gophers.
Lots of them.
Yeah. How about swimming? Did you have a favorite swimming place in the summertime?
Well, yes. The river had some good holes. We had one favorite place we called the Blodgett Hole. That's just over in Tama County. And shall I tell you about Harlow? I was in charge of the younger ones if we went. My older boys were in charge of me when I went to the swimming hole. It was probably 5-6 feet deep. And there was a steep vertical bank right at the bottom of the bluff where we'd dive. And it was a nice place. And so we were having fun there one summer day. And of course, everybody was swimming nude then. Harlow showed up missing. And he couldn't swim very well yet. And I was distraught. He's gone. He's drowned. So I went downstream around to the bend to try to recover his body. And before I got around the bend, I heard his voice back up there. What he had done, he had found underneath that steep bank with the trees above and the roots, he had found a muskrat's nest. The entrance was underwater, and then there's a shelf up here, and he had been up there listening to us talk. And I called him a rat for doing that.
Did you have a problem with bloodsuckers when you go swimming?
Oh, sure. Especially, we had a place up towards Quarry on a creek that we liked. We'd go up the railroad track, and that creek had a good swimming hole. That was terrible for leeches, much bloodsuckers we call them. And we'd all each have to examine each other and tear them off. Yeah.
July 4th, was that a big time?
It was big. They had a celebration usually up in the square, and at that time there were lots of Civil War veterans living in LeGrand. And they would dress up in their fancy. I remember Cap Beavat lived close to us. He had his old captain's suit, and he looked real neat. And they'd have some speaker of everybody knew about. maybe from the State House or somewhere, to come and give us a speech. I don't remember. They must have had some band or some, because we had, Palmer College had bands, and we had lots. My older brothers played in bands. They must have had some, but I don't recall much about that.
You speak of the Palmer College. Was that any connection to the Palmer that created the penmanship style?
I wouldn't know. Palmer was the name of this little college. We had a Christian church besides the Quaker ones that I attended. The Christian one was right across the street from our home. And, I want to tell you about the parson. But anyway, the Palmer College was a Christian church school. And while I was fairly young, they gave up and moved to some town in Missouri, I think. But could I tell you this one about the old Christian minister that lived just across the street and down the way? He loved children, didn't have any, and he would get us together, and he would shake hands with us around. We would be sitting on wood chunks. Shake hands. Now you will be able to tell your friends that you have shaken the hand that shook the hand of Abraham Lincoln. He had actually, as a child, had shaken the hands of Abraham Lincoln. Now, I was second down. Us kids were actually shaking the hand with the guy that did.
I can imagine you felt pretty important.
That was pretty important. I still remember it.
Was your folks church-going people?
Yes, very much so.
Did they make sure that you went to Sunday school? Or?
That's right. Sunday morning, there was a regular procession of kids in the kitchen. We had a long kitchen with a range in the middle, and the bathtub would be in the back. And kids in turn would go strip and go into the bath. Mother would get us washed up in the sudsy water, and Dad would be on the open end, and he would take us and dry us all up and get us dressed for Sunday school.
Who got the dirty water, the oldest or the youngest?
Youngest. I was in the middle. But it was real soapy.
Melon patches in the summertime. Was there any melon patches to raid?
Yes, I'm afraid so. Well, the Bean family had a farm north of town, not too far out, and they were not so much for the ordinary corn and oats. They did have some, I guess, back, but they raised lots of strawberries for the market, and they raised melons galore, both cantaloupes and watermelons. And at night, while the melon season was full swing, a bunch of us young monks would get together at the town square and lay our plans, and we would go out along the country road to the bean place and raid their melons. And I was lucky because one of the Beans had 3 boys, and one of them, the oldest, was Ray. And Ray was a good friend of mine and schoolmate. And he would lead me to where the best melons were. That was fun.
Did the Mills boys have a bicycle?
They had bicycles. I would not have had one of my own, except that my older sister Helen, she craved a bicycle. She had to have a bicycle. And so she always knew what was in my bureau drawers, and I had a place where I kept my money I'd earned picking berries. And so she got me involved. She found a catalog with a bicycle that would sell for $40. And with what she had saved and what I'd saved, and I was 2/3 of it, we sent for the bicycle. It was an American. And we had a lot of fun for that for a couple of 3 years, till she fell took a tumble on it and busted it all up.
Did your mother, with such a large family, did she raise chickens too?
The family raised chickens out. We had a barn in the far corner for the horses and the buggy, and a fenced lot for the horses to exercise. And then Dad, I remember when he moved in a chicken house that he'd gotten from somebody and put it in the one part of our big garden. And he got a setting of Rhode Island Reds. We raised Rhode Island Reds so we could have our own eggs. We had our own milk, had our cow. And
did you have just one cow or?
One cow.
And one of the boys got the job of milking it, or?
I don't recall so much of the process. I would like to tell you a little story about the cow. Well, but Dad had just brought the fresh heifer in and put it in beside the horses in a stall, and then it would go out, and we would throw stuff from the garden over the fence for the horses and the cow. Well, we hadn't had that cow but a short time until I was a babe in arms, born the 2nd of January. I suppose I was 6 months old. Put me on her hip, and out the kitchen door she went, down across the garden, and towards the barn to see that cow. And we found the cow in the stable. And this is what happened. I don't remember it. I was 6 months old. But this is a story the family told. The mother scratched the forehead of the cow, and the cow stuck its tongue out and licked my foot. And then it quit licking my foot, and it gave a big moo and just scared the devil out of me. And actually, I went into convulsions, and they had to have Dad help me out. So I've always claimed that there's where I lost it all. I lost everything right there. I'm scared.
So you use that as a crutch throughout your life.
That's right. I've been a little bit on the slow side ever since.
How many horses did your dad have?
2, 18.
Was you boys ever allowed to ride them?
I don't think we did. I'm sure that old Flory, the mare, could be ridden. And I remember we would tether them out along the street to eat grass sometimes. Glenn was doing that with Flory, and she stepped on him and cut a tendon in his leg. So they were always sharp-shod. But anyway...
That was his transportation, so those horses were quite important to him, his profession.
Important. Don't think it wasn't a family crisis when they were disposed of.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever have the misfortune to get stepped on by a horse?
Yes, I did. I'm sorry to say, and I still bear the results. I was harnessing old Harry, and he stepped on my right foot, and he didn't want to let go. I pounded and pounded. I thought for a month before he put up his foot, and out I came. Why I didn't go and have Dad look at it, I don't know. I know I broke some of those internal bones. It's still a pain.
Mm-hmm. Christmas, was that a special time around the Mills family?
It was. It was special. The only thing at home that I recall, we each hung up our socks. They would be for the small things like maybe a mouth organ or something like that. But the big thing was to get shined up and go to the church about 4 blocks. And everybody filled the church. A big Christmas tree in the corner with piles of packages underneath it, and cranberry and popcorn strings hung over it for decorations.
What was I can imagine you probably didn't receive too many gifts. What would have been your favorite Christmas gift that you had received when you was a child?
The one I'm sure clothing would always be in order, but the one thing that sticks in my memory so well, my dad gave me a catcher's mitt, and it was made of course, big, bulgy leather with the finger holes, and it was made of cream-colored leather. So soft, so nice. I loved that. That was Christmas time. We couldn't use it till next summer. When we did, everybody got to use it. It was a lovely present.
Did you have a Christmas tree? Did your folks put up a Christmas tree?
Not at home. The church was church. We were well oriented towards church.
Mm-hmm. So in the wintertime, what did all the children do to keep themselves occupied?
Well,
Was
number
there
one,
sledding and skating and
outside. Yes, we did. Pemberton's Hill was off the edge of town, and that was a good place to slide. And skating, we went to the bio on the stock farm, just maybe a mile out. And that was a good place. We could build fires on the ice, and there's a lot of timber there.
I imagine the adults, they traveled by bobsled and cutters. And
That's right. And one enjoyable thing, especially on Saturdays, we kids would go to the edge of town, walk probably, and catch some farmer coming to town in his bobsled with the horses had bells on their bridles, jingling, and we called it hopping bobs. That was a big thing. Get a bob ride into town to the square.
Did they close school because of bad snowstorms, or?
I can't remember that they ever did. Weather didn't seem to phase us.
Taverns, was your dad a drinking man? Did you
No.
have taverns in
We always kept a fifth of whiskey locked up in a cabinet for medicinal purposes. But no, there was no drinking, no, nothing of that kind. There was one little slip. When Ernest got high school age, we got curious. So somebody gave us a prescription or a recipe for Applejack. And we tried it out in the barn. Ernest had his own little room in the barn for his collection of interesting things. So we made it. And when we got it all made and sipped it, out it went. We couldn't even smell it. It was terrible.
Did you boys ever try smoking or chewing?
Chewing was a man's thing, and I'm sure that I tried it, but it just was too bad. But smoking, it was every boy had to cut up newspaper and for papers and roll his own cigarettes out of. There was a mullein weed that grew a stalk, and the seed pods up there would look like tobacco. When they were ripe, we'd strip that off for tobacco. And then for cigars, we used grapevine because they have little, you could draw air through them, make stogies out of them.
And they weren't too bad, grapevine.
Well, they were good. They would burn my tongue, and a cigarette wouldn't.
You never used toilet paper and corn silk, then?
Corn silk we did. I don't think we had toilet paper. We used Sears Roebuck.
Yeah. Okay. Gypsies. Was there gypsies in the traveling the country back in those days?
They did, and I have some interesting memories of them. They always traveled in wagons with a team and a canvas top and a family. There'd be often 2 or 3 families together. And they would usually, around our area, they'd find a place along the river and set up camp. And the women would always be the first we knew that they were around. They'd hit the square and make a tour around trying to tell fortunes for a quarter. And they always wore long, flowing skirts. The local women always figured that they were pickpockets, had big pockets in the skirts, and if a storekeeper wasn't watching why, they'd grab something and put it in there. But anyway, would you like to know about a case my dad had?
Yes.
I thought that was kind of an interesting one. He told this story 3 years later. A couple of gypsy men came to his office and told him that they had a woman who was going to have a baby. Would he come? I didn't go on this case, of course, but he went, and this is his story. He found the gypsy lady. I don't know whether she was in the wagon or in a tent, but she was in the stress of delivering. And Dad went in and helped her through it and got the baby taken care of. He went to the river to clean up as best he could. And when he told the gypsy father that the bill would be $10. Well, he said he was destitute. He had never seen $10 and probably never would. So Dad let it go. Thought it was just a gift to them. And the gypsy followed him to the buggy and, "Doctor, I need a paper." And of course, Dad got the idea. He wanted a birth certificate because they travel and break country lines. And Dad said, "No, no paper, no pay, no paper." And the guy reached in and pulled out, he said, a roll of bills that are choke an ox. He gave him $10. That's better than a load of wood.
Did you boys have a treehouse?
Yes. Yeah, we had there were big maple trees, soft maples, around our place, along the street lines. And back of the wood house, there was a big one, and it was forked, so it made a nice place for a tree house. We built it out of old lumber that we picked up. And my sisters loved that tree house. They'd go back up there to sew and tat and whatever they needed. But anyway, I learned a sad lesson there. Never rub your hip against a board like that. In this case, she had left a needle sticking in the wood, and I had run the needle backwards into my hip, and I couldn't pull the damn thing out. So I went to my dad, and he got some forceps, and he pulled it out. So, watch out. These tree houses can be dangerous.
Did you have any Indians in the neighborhood in those days?
Yes, the Meskwaki tribe, Fox and Sac and Fox, lived just out of Tama, and they had the reservation, I think 25,000 acres. They had come up, they tell us, from Oklahoma and bought this land. It wasn't a regular government place, they owned it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they loved to go to Marshalltown at fair time and circus time. They would come through town with their team and wagon and some dogs behind them, running along, heading for Marshalltown. And almost always they would go back home through town with more dogs than they started with, because they would catch any stray dogs, put a collar on it, tie it up, take it home, and they eat them.
Bill Cody, did you ever see a Bill Cody Wild West show?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Wild Bill. Mm-hmm. I remember so well seeing him with a white, all dressed in cowboy stuff, big broad hat, white beard and white hair, shining with a white horse, parading around. I well remember that.
Minute now. Okay. The top left-hand photo there, where you're sitting on the ground, Ralph.
That's the family in the front yard. I think Ernest hadn't arrived yet.
How about the automobile? Was that your dad's?
That was my dad's first Model T. Are there chains on it? I can't see.
Yes, there is.
Well, they were needed.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the time I've dug mud out from under those fenders so it could get out of the mud hole.
I noticed on the front of the building there it says Dr. Mills. That must have been his office.
That was his office.
Mm-hmm. And then the lower photograph, that was the family, the Mills
That's
family?
the whole family, including Ernest this time. My dad and mother, I love that picture of them. I like them all. But I don't have any very good pictures of dad and mother, and that's one of them.
The one in the upper top, the gentleman there in a soldier's uniform?
All right. Max was a lieutenant in the Army. He was a dentist just out of college at Iowa. And he was home on furlough or something, and my brother Ernest was a little type. So they were saluting each other.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody else get caught up in World War One?
Yes, my brother Glenn was in the Navy. He was on a destroyer, the Stribling, and he had a good job because his work was on the bridge, right beside the captain. He was a signalman, so he had to take all the messages and give all the messages to the ships in their area. They didn't have wireless then. They did it with flags.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a boyhood friend and somebody in the neighborhood that you had the opportunity to play and grow up with and remained a good friend throughout your life? You had mentioned a Dave Ferguson to me in the pre-interview.
Would you go on with that a little? I didn't quite.
Boyhood. Did you have any real close friends, boys that were real close friends that your playmates throughout your years and growing up? You had mentioned a Dave Ferguson to me.
Dave Ferguson was a farmer that lived north of town. My brother Max married his daughter Reba. I had some special good friends in high school that we went to Minnesota fishing with and played. We made up our own basketball and baseball teams. We didn't have coaches then. I'll tell this is about Bert Tweed. He was a very good friend. Anyway, we were playing the town of Colo in basketball, and I dove for a free ball, and while I was in the air, one of the Colo boys followed me, and he straddled me, grabbed me by the back of the head and the hair, and started pumping my forehead into the floor. And he hadn't got more than one or two pumps in until Bert Tweed, my buddy, made a flying tackle and just smeared him over against the wall. So that was the way. And the referee didn't mind. That was good baseball or basketball.
When did you see your first airplane?
Well, I'm sorry to say I had problems. I was probably 9, 10 years old, and I had gotten a boil on my right cheek, and it had swelled up my eyes till they're tight. And I spent my time on the living room couch. It was summertime, I could hear the kids all out on the lawn, having fun, playing, and all at once I heard them say, "Airplane, airplane." And then I could hear the roar of the motor. I couldn't take it. So I got up and, without any vision, went out the south door and down the steps across the lawn, and I pried and pried my eyes to see that noisemaker. All I could hear was the hum of the motor. I couldn't see a thing. So the first plane I ever saw, I didn't see at all.
We need to get you into college.
Okay.
So you graduated from grade school in LeGrand.
In high school.
And high school in LeGrand. And did you decide, or did your dad prompt you to decide to go to college?
My dad was 100% for college for all his kids and helped all except Max. Max had some help from a neighbor, but he helped finance all the rest of us kids. All right.
Where did you decide you wanted to go to college?
The World War I was on, and one of the local boys that was a very good friend of my older brother's classmates in school, and Clark Bowen, joined the Army, or they didn't have an Air Corps then, the Army, and the Army had an Air Force. But he learned to fly, and they put him in the job of teaching others to fly. And he was some place, Pensacola, I believe. And he took one of his students up to fly over the Gulf, and the guy froze to the controls and he couldn't overcome it. They went in and he was drowned. They brought him home. They had a nice funeral for him at our church, and the main speaker at the funeral was the president of Cornell College. He had been in school at Cornell before he went into the service. Well, actually, I think that's what that one man, the president of Cornell, impressed me so that I went there.
Mm-hmm. How did you get there?
Train. The Northwestern ran through Mount Vernon.
Was that your first time away from home?
Yes, I guess it was, because I remember I was so homesick for a few weeks. I had a room with a family, a widow lady who had 2 sons, and she knew how to mother a boy. She helped me through it.
At this time, did you have any idea what you wanted to do with your life?
I had figured all the time that I would go into teaching. That would be about my speed.
Yeah.
So I took general education, science and math and social studies and ended up with a certificate, a first grade certificate, to teach anywhere in the state.
Was your dad doing well enough by this time that he could help you through school, or did you have to find jobs?
I worked all I could. In summer times and vacation times, I always worked, usually farm work. And in Mount Vernon, I cleaned basements and or changed windows and washed windows, anything I could do to earn anything I could.
Wait on tables?
I waited on tables in the Bowman Hall. And my dad had a checking account that honored my checks. At the end of the school year, we'd total them up, and I'd sign a note. Mm-hmm. He kept them in a little pigeonhole there.
When you got into college, you're grown up now. Did the Cornell have any dances, or did you do any dating? Or
we could date, and we could go to the Palisades for picnics. Dancing was forbidden. Let's see. They had social affairs, and I can't remember just exactly what they were, but the girls' dormitories would invite the guests, and they'd have refreshments and stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's nothing like you would see today.
Do you remember they used to have a day in the spring of the year, they called it Pal Day at Palisades?
That's right.
Where everybody would walk out to
That's right. Yeah, walk out to the Palisades, and there was an old, we called him well, I guess you'd call him anyway, forget the nationality.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Had a cafe there and a place you could rent cottages. And I think once in a while we would go in and have a sandwich or something like that.
Did they have boat rides you could take?
They had boats there, and I'm sure that we did use the boat, rent boats, because I remember Hubert, my roommate, and I got a boat with the girls, and Hubert's girl couldn't keep her mouth shut. She was sitting where she could see me row And she says, "Ralph, you have the most beautiful muscles on your shoulders." That was embarrassing. I didn't know how to take that.
You weren't used to
No,
compliments like
I
that
wasn't.
from a girl.
No, that is foreign territory for me.
Well, years later, there used to be Biederman's used to have a resort area there and run the old motel. Does that name sound familiar, Biederman?
No,
That was later years then.
I think it might have been.
Did you meet a girl in college?
I did. I was a junior, and there was a freshman girl. I had a friend by the name of Rogers. He roomed in my dormitory, in my rooming house, and he came home one time. And he says, "I just had a date with Ruth Northrop." "Well, why don't you date her, Ralph? She's a nice girl." So next opportunity, I dated her, and Ruth Northrop, she was from Parkersburg. Her dad was a minister up there, and we got along just fine. And I don't know if we were engaged, but we were aiming that way. And she stayed only the 1 year. She had been working in a bank up there. She went back to her bank job. The bank was failing, and we wrote letters back and forth, telling what a trial it was. She could see the handwriting on the wall. The bank was practically bankrupt. After it did go bankrupt, she worked for the bank examiner. Anyway, that was Ruth and me.
When you, back in those days when you dated, did you dare think about kissing a girl goodnight on your first date?
I don't think we would consider that as proper, the thing to do.
What year did you graduate?
25.
And you got a degree in?
It was an AB degree, bachelor's degree, and if any more description, I don't know as I could remember very much.
So young Ralph Mills graduated now from college.
He got a certificate to teach.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think he was going to pursue his first job?
Well, I started out looking for jobs. I thought a country school somewhere, preferably in Marshall County. And I knew some people that were on school boards in the rural area. I canvassed 2 or 3 of those. They were already filled. And about that, my younger sister Marion had gone to Penn and learned to be a secretary. She had gotten her first job with the highway department in Ames. And her boss was Mr. Beard. He was chief engineer of that division of the state highways. And I'm telling you this because I imagine it happened. She involved her boss, Beard, in getting me hired as a rodman on a survey party that didn't exist. But they were going to have one in Grinnell. I went down there, and in a week or two, a guy came along. He had been hired out as the chief of the party, survey party. And then they got a couple of other guys. There were 4 of us, the chief, and so we went to work, starting to get Iowa out of the mud on Highway 6, starting at Victor, up to Grinnell, over to Newton, and then on. So I think Marion was responsible, but I took to that because I loved outside work. Done lots of farm work. I didn't like quite the idea of sitting in a schoolroom with a bunch of kids. This is a lot better.
Yeah. But did your schooling help you with what you were? Or did you have to get additional?
If I'd known it, I'd have taken surveying because it was there. I saw the boys out surveying. But in 11 months, I learned enough about the operations of a survey squad on a paving job that they took my boss and moved him off and put me in charge. So in 11 months, I was head of the survey party with my own contractor, my own set of plans, here's the plans, here's your man, get busy and get this done.
So, and then about this time period, the country went into a depression. Did that affect you any? Maybe not working for the road department.
I think I was in Ames when it hit worst. And the depression was a calamity to the business people and most people. The highway department still operated and still wanted to get Iowa out of the mud as fast as possible. I lived in Ames, worked 3 ways out of Ames. All right, 1930, that was the year my daughter was born.
Yeah. What year did you get married?
1926 in Grinnell.
Oh, let's back up then.
Okay, we can back up.
Show a picture here of
Okay.
your new wife.
Okay, do you have that?
Mm-hmm.
That's Ruth, as she was when she was young. We were married 67 years, and she was the only lady that I would ever have wanted for a wife. I've had some admirable friends, but none like her.
Okay, and then in 1929 or 30, you had your first daughter.
At 1930, she was born. We lived in Ames, and we saw the signals coming, so I took Ruth, and we headed for LeGrand through Marshalltown to see my dad. We got there, and it wasn't long before. Well, I want to tell you, driving, I missed every chuck hole in the whole 50 miles. I drove so carefully on her account. We got to LeGrand, and Dad put us in his Model T, and away we went to what was then the Deaconess Hospital in Marshalltown, 10 miles. I think he hit every every hole in that road. It was the roughest ride I'd ever had. But anyway, Rose was born there on the 9th of November, 1930. And I've been loving her ever since.
And then in Ames, you spent a couple of 3 years in Ames then too, didn't you?
Yes. As I engineered 3 ways, the Lincoln Highway, both east and over to Boone west, then north towards Story City on what the number 169 or whatever it was, 69 east. The one to Des Moines had beaten me to the draw.
And then you spent 3 years in Des Moines too.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, were you still? What was your position at this time?
I was still the same. I never the pay went up, but I was still party chief.
And then you went to Adele, Iowa.
All right, Rose was approaching 5 in 35, and I wanted to get a job that didn't move me around every few months like I had been doing through my life. And I found a job as assistant county engineer in Dallas County, which is Adel, about 20 miles west of Des Moines. We moved over there, and I hadn't been there too long until the existing county engineer died of a heart attack. And the county board of supervisors ran the county, and there was debate as to who would fill the shoes of the dead engineer. And I laid low. They had a chief of party, survey party, that did all the surveying in the county, who was far the choice, but he was not a registered engineer. The county board approached me to see if I would let him use my engineer's license. I said, 0, no. If they wanted an engineer, get one with a license. Make it legal. He couldn't sign anything legally as engineer without a license. They hum and hawed. They didn't want me, but they finally took me. One of them particularly was a negative. He wanted me out as quick as possible. I stood a couple of years, and then they ousted me.
Did you do a stint on the Alaskan Highway?
Yeah, I did. That was World War II. The Japs Navy was coming down the coast from the Aleutians, down the British Columbia coast, heading for Seattle. And we needed a land road through Canada and into Alaska. And the Army enlisted lots of contractors, bridge contractors and grading contractors with equipment. And the one that hired me was surfacing. He'd been my contractor in Dallas County, surfacing with gravel. So I went up with him as a road boss out on I had a charge of bluff where we made our own granite surfacing material, trucked it out and dumped it. Anyway, that was my job.
This was the Alcan.
The Alcan, we call it the Alaska Highway now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my friends and relatives have been up that way, and they give me a heck because of how many rocks broke their windshield or their dented their car.
Did you spend any time in the military?
Yes, I did. I got untangled that in my memory. I was in the Navy for, I think, about 9 months. I went back home. There was no construction, nothing moving, and all I could see was the wartime going into a munitions factory, which was available, and I was just simply abhorred that type of work. I wanted to be out where I could see the horizon. And so we debated, Ruth and I debated a lot what to do, how to solve the problem. And I don't know how it came, but I went for an interview with a naval officer in Des Moines who was in charge of enlistees. And I talked it over with him, and he said the best he could do, he couldn't give me a JG, a lieutenant job, but he had some openings for Seaman First Class, and what I wanted was to get into the Seabees. That was up my line, and this is what I told him. This was where I wanted to go. And he says, the best path to do is to join the regular Navy and put your chet in, they call it a chet, a demand, a request, for a place in the Seabees. Well, if that's the best I can do, I expect that's it. So I enlisted with him. They sent me to Farragut and put me in with a bunch of engineers that were maintaining the place there at the training center. I was there and helped reconstruct barracks for the first waves that came in. And I did a lot of street work with concrete and doing things that needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. You were discharged then in...
I think it's January.
46, possibly?
I guess it would be that far.
And
This is
then,
in January because I wanted to get home for Christmas and they wouldn't let me home.
did you have any idea then what you were going to do?
I'll tell you what. I assumed that I would get, when they got to building roads again, I'd still be running a survey party. I was used to it and I was comfortable in that work. I was talking to somebody at the courthouse in Des Moines, can't remember who it was, and he says, "Say, Ralph, there was a fella in here, he may be here yet, from Adel, from Marion, Iowa. He's a railroad engineer and he wants to hire railroad people. Well, for many years I'd worked with fellows who had worked railroad engineering and heard a lot about it. I thought, why not give it a try? So I got in touch with this engineer, district engineer in Marion, and I went over and signed up and hired on with him. That would be in February.
Of 57, perhaps? 1957?
I have a little problem there. I think it was before that. It was right after I got out of the Navy.
47.
40,
In 47.
47?
57, I went with the city.
Sorry about that.
There we're going. Now we're on the
47.
right track.
47.
I think that's right.
And what was your duties when you got to Marion? What did you find out your duties would be?
It was in management, and I can't list all of the duties. I can mention a few. We had track of all the trackage. If there was a wreck, we were there trying to find out why and how to fix it. Every section man, every section foreman was our boy. If we needed weeds cut, certain place, we'd get them cut. One thing of interest, maybe in this instance, would be lawsuits. The railroad was subject to being sued for a cow getting killed on their tracks for almost anything. Then it was my duty to visit the scene, take a survey, and draw a picture of every tree, every fence, everything, and make a plat, 3 by 3, with showing the situation where the injury was or the death was caused. And then the judge and the jury could see what they were talking about. That was my job.
Yeah. How large of an area did you cover?
From the Mississippi to Council Bluffs. And then we had all the branch lines that went north and south.
Did you must have spent a lot of time on the road.
Most of my time was on the road, and I'll tell you this. For 3 years, I worked under these conditions. My wife and daughter in Adel, she going to high school with her classmates. I hated Marion. I thought it was the most despicable place. I had a room not too far from the depot. And when I got them, Rose finished high school and I got them over there into an apartment, that was the most delightful town in the world.
So you commuted back and forth to Adel for
3 years.
3 years.
It'll be Saturday night, take the train to Perry, get there towards midnight. My car will be waiting for me, drive 12, 14 miles to Adel, and be with them for those short hours. Sunday night was despicable. Going back to that car to Perry and to Marion and back to my room, it is no life to live.
Did you work for the railroad long enough by this time to have a pass that you could use to go back and forth?
Passes didn't mean anything to me. Chicago put passes out. Right off the bat, I got what they called a golden pass. And that entitled me, I could show it to any conductor on any railroad in the USA. And I could get free transportation.
Was this back in the days of steam?
Yes, and this is one part of my railroad experience. I helped in the process of converting from steam to gas, to diesel. I wrecked many a water station and a coaling station, got rid of them, put in the fueling stations, but we moved them because a diesel could go so much farther than a steam. Had to rearrange all of the support people.
That was major.
That was a big job, big job. I didn't quite realize I was doing that at the time, but I was doing it.
Because it was going to affect your livelihood later on.
That was my work.
Yeah.
Which railroad was that?
Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul.
At the peak of this railroad period in Marion, how many trains do you suppose went in and out of Marion in a day's time? A large number of them?
I would only be able to give a long guess. We had a good-sized yard, freight yard, in Marion, and we had one in Newhall. Passengers, there were at least two major ones each way a day, and there were probably small, these were transcontinental that had a big traffic. We had, at first we had the donkey engines with a car that would go up the side tracks to Lehigh and down to south to Urbana, all those places. And then we went to diesel on those.
Who was your supervisor?
Ralph Harford. Ralph, I believe Harford was his name.
You spent so many hours riding the rails. Did you ever take your wife and daughter on the weekends?
No.
For a train ride to Chicago or any place?
No. Never even thought of it.
You had mentioned a Bocher?
Betcher. He was my boss on the railroad. He was stationed there at the depot in Marion. And all these demands for service from our engineering department, he had to distribute them among about 6 of us that worked out of the office. Had our desks back in the main office.
Was he a good guy to work for?
He raised a family. We didn't like Les very well. After I left the railroad, I realized that was my fault as much as his. He was doing the best he could, but he could get kind of nasty sometimes. He raised a family on 6th Street in Marion.
Was this during the period where there's still a lot of troop trains? Going through the.
Yeah, there was a while when the passenger trains were crowded with, and I might go into a car full of service people, and I'd go down the length of it looking for a hole in the wall to hide, and I'd see this. Maybe I shouldn't tell this, but I guess I will. You're grown up. I'd see a bunch of soldiers packed around one double seat that was turned face to face, and they'd be packed around there making a curtain. And I know there was a soldier and a gal in there causing the focus. Is a focus, all right. And I'd have to sneak around and find some place.
You wouldn't say anything.
No. The soldiers were doing the best they could.
You had told me a story about meeting one of the Kennedy family.
Oh, yeah. I tried to get on at Perry one time, and the vestibule was plugged, and the only place at all was right opposite the entrance. Climb the steps, and then right there was across that aisle was all kinds of luggage. So the people were hedged in, so I couldn't get into the car. So I just went and jumped over onto that luggage and flung myself on it. And lo and behold, the luggage moved, and there was a guy under there. I hadn't seen him. And he got out from under, and I got off of him. And he grabbed his suitcase and protect himself, I guess. I saw the tag. It was one of the Roosevelt, I forget which one, Roosevelt boys. It was one of the president's boys. So I got to sit on a Roosevelt.
I can imagine you were on a first-name basis with an awful lot of the railroad crew and traveling that much.
They would know me, and they would. One thing, like if we were ballasting the road from here to Amana, we'd have these work trains hauling rock out, and the engineer and the conductor and the brakeman, they were just like old friends. I mean, we're just one class of people doing the work. And I'd be riding in the caboose usually.
Were there a lot of black personnel working the train
No.
crew at that time?
The way I remember it, and I could be wrong, but the main place where we would see black people on the road would be if I went through a dining car, the waitresses were almost always black.
Mhm.
Why, I don't know. That's just the way it was at that time.
For them, it was a respected occupation to be a cook or a waitress or a
Indeed it was.
porter or
Probably paid more probably than it would than me.
than Ralph Mills got
I
paid.
expect.
Did you see the downturn coming in the railroad as far as Marion was concerned, switching from steam?
Well, the thing that took me out of railroading and put me in another job was the diesels. When the diesels got well entrenched and the steam was out of the way, a diesel could go a lot farther without support. So they moved our office to Perry. Then that went from Perry to Council Bluffs. And that is management doing the best they could. All right. I would be forced to pick up my family and go to Perry. I had been to Perry. It was part of my hate thing. I'd been there traveling to go to Adele. I didn't like Perry. So I had a neighbor and a friend who was on the city council. And he knew about my being out of my situation anyway. So he worked on the city council. He thought the town was just starting to grow. They needed an engineer. They'd hired consultants. They needed a regular engineer. And I was available. And son of a gun, he got the council to hire me. And the mayor didn't like it because it was he was a self-important old rascal.
What was his name?
Oh, do I dare to tell it?
Yes, sure. That's history.
Let's call it later. I forget
Okay.
now.
What time period was this when you left the railroad?
57, I think. And I worked till...
Ralph, all of this time you had been in Marion now, what did your wife work outside of the home? Did she have employment in Marion?
Yes. Ruth was city librarian in the town of Adele for a long time before we moved. When I think we landed in Marion. I got an apartment on 6th Avenue in June. And Rose was just out of high school in 1938, whatever year was. Anyway, the library in Marion was a Carnegie library, and they found out that she had that experience, and they tried to get her to come right now. And she says, I'll stick around home until Rose goes to college. So in August, she went to work at the library. And there's some interesting stories about that. It was a typical Carnegie library, well housed, well facilitated.
And she worked there
until the librarian decided to retire.
Did she become head librarian then?
Yes. Mm-hmm. She was chief librarian at that, right there.
Okay. So, Ralph got his new job with on the city with Marion, and what was your first duties?
The first job that council gave me was to determine the city limits all around Marion. And don't kid me, that is a big job. There's some lots of research on that, and some screwball boundaries. But that was my first big job.
When you went in there, was the council, was it still small enough where it was kind of disorganized, not like it was today, that it was a...
I think they worked pretty much as a unit and not in committees so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Did you enjoy your years working with the city of Marion?
I did.
As
In
much
many-
as the railroad?
Many ways. I got closer to the people. With the railroad, it was strangers I was dealing with in courts and stuff like that. With here, I was dealing with my neighbors, and I had every opportunity in the world to make enemies because in order to pave streets, and that was our big job, we had to set up assessment districts and assess the people that were involved to pay for the job, although they could put it on deferred payments. That spending other people's money is not a popular thing. But when I retired, I deliberated on that. I couldn't think of any citizen in Marion that I could pick out that really indicated to me that they didn't like me. I mean, I think I was well accepted.
Can you think of any major improvements to the city of Marion that you can take credit for? Or?
Well, when I went to work, we debated my compensation, and I told him I would come if I got as much equal to what I got with the railroad. I'm not going to tell what it was. And that was all right with them. And then they told me, well, of course, 25% of that will be spent by the water board. So they got out cheap. And the water board was a 3-man citizen committee. The water department had been recently bought from private interests. And I have nothing but respect for those 3 water board members. They helped me a lot. In that time, we developed a water system that I don't think could be beat anywhere.
Have you gotten the chance to drive around the perimeter of Marion to see how much it expanded in the last 5 years?
Yes. I have had people take me the circuit around not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And it's fantastic. They've built new towers. They've gone so far past me, I can't even... it's a stranger. I'm a stranger.
Yeah. What year did you retire, Ralph?
1970.
And what age were you when you retired?
68.
68. And then your wife, Ruth, what year did she pass away in?
1993, in the 6th of July.
So you and her did get to spend 23 years at you in a retirement stage. Did you do traveling or anything?
Let's see, I'm not sure of that arithmetic. 23 years of what?
You retired in 70 and she passed away in 93?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. After you retired, did you and her get a chance to travel and do a lot of things together?
I don't believe so. We had done vacation touring all our lives, coast to coast, Canada. We didn't get to Alaska then, but Canada and Mexico. We were down pretty near Mexico City. Every state.
Did you get to take Ruth on a lot of these trips?
Some of those we did. As she grew up, until she outgrew it. Yeah.
Did she go to college?
Rose,
Yeah.
she went to Iowa State to learn to be a teacher, got a degree, taught 3 years, grade school, and I paid for her. Well, anyway, then she went to the university for 1 year, her junior year, to improve herself. But she caught a fella instead, and they got married and formed my successors. Rose, my only daughter, her family of 3 wonderful boys, and their children.
You wrote a book not too many years back. about nanny goats.
Do you want to know about nanny goats?
These are some of your favorite childhood memories.
I think first, don't you think we should explain nanny goat?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, the first, it's just a whole collection of little story units. I have 34 of them. Little one paragraph or one page to a story. The memories of my childhood. Okay. My first story was about how, when we were kids at home, my dad would like to tell us stories or read us stories. And one of the youngsters, I think it was Marjorie, asked, "Papa, will you tell us an anecdote?" She had misunderstood it and thought anecdotes. And I say in here that I thought an anecdote would be better than an anecdote. So I told 34 nanny goats. And I asked the publisher if he would. I picked this out of a whole picture, a big picture of a goat flock. I asked him to put a rose in its mouth. It's hardly visible, but it's there.
That book will warm anyone's heart, believe me.
Oh, really?
You have a nice photo here of you and your wife, Ruth. When would this have been? Would this been an anniversary of?
That was our 50th wedding anniversary. Yes. Oh, okay. I don't have to see it. I've seen it before.
And that would have been what year? Do you remember, Ralph?
Well, we were married
26.
in 26,
Mhm.
and it was 50.
Okay.
So it'd be 30 in 1936, wouldn't it? You tell it. You figure it out. From 26 and 50. 76.
86.
86.
Very nice.
She was a good partner, I'll tell you that.
Ralph, you've seen a lot of changes in your 100 years. And just thinking about what technology, the changes. GPS. You're familiar with GPS, the global satellite position that the highway department now uses to do all their surveying.
And the trucking companies.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been so delightful to have that when you were surveying?
We wouldn't even dream. We couldn't even imagine such things.
Did you ever think man would get to the moon?
Well, of course, we'd never even dream of such a thing. That would be out of man's realm entirely. From our point of view, it would never occur to us to even dream that people would want to. But it happened.
Another question, Amtrak. What is their problem, Ralph, in your opinion? They're having so much financial difficulties in staying afloat.
It'd be pretty hard for me, from my point of view, to tell, except it's a transition in mode of transportation. I was surprised when they started bringing flowers in by airplane or any other commodity like that. It was fantastic. I didn't believe that they would fly stuff like that. And now they'll fly anybody or anything. And I just couldn't vision in those days being without rail service. Now, how they're going to ship trainloads of coal to the powerhouses, the only way they can do that is do away with the powerhouses and use some other form of heat. But there are commodities that absolutely, I mean, from my point of view, are out of the question. We couldn't. Coal is a good example.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't hold.
Ralph, show us some of these photos of your children and grandchildren.
Okay, I'm glad to do that. This is Mitch. He's my youngest grandson, and he, I think he got a degree in accounting. and he's a CPA, but his
There. Good.
his life has been spent, early life has been spent in government service. He was, as a 5-year-old, he told his parents that he knew all about wires. He meant wireless. He was already starting to get in on the, and he came out to be a very good computer specialist. So he worked for Uncle Sam in the Orient for a long time as maintaining all the services, Navy, Army, Marines, anyone in government service that had to have a improvement in their communications. He was the guy that went from Alaska to Abyssinia. Anyway, he married this gal after he came back. I'm sorry, I changed that.
Okay.
He married a gal, a Filipino girl, and we think she's a darling, and they still live in Pasadena, next to Washington, D.C., and he works in there still for Uncle Sam. And they have these two, Marcus and, anyway, the two twin boys. They're early stage here, but now they yell in the phone to me, "Hey, great grandpa!" and just jabber. They'll be back. Mitch loved University of Iowa band. He loved to play in the marching band. Even when he was in Tokyo, he'd come back at homecoming so he could march in the marching band. He'll be back at homecoming, and I'll see these kids again.
Was there any other twins in the Mills family?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Now you can position us.
And this one, Ralph?
This is Dr. Kelly Ross, my daughter's oldest son, a graduate of the University of Iowa School of Medicine, and his family. He married a country girl from northern Iowa. They live in Osage, and he has a very fine medical practice in that area, delivers lots of babies, and he has 4 children. The oldest one is now a junior, will be a junior pre-med student at the university. And I wish I had a better picture of him, but he's a handsome young guy. He looks down on the top of my head without any problem. Tall and nice looking. But anyway, the second child is a daughter, Beth. She's just out of high school and is lined up to go to the university. And she's a sweet gal. And these kids all like to come and hug me. And then there's something else about them I want to tell you. The third is, she's a high school kid, and we don't know yet, she's a great band player. And the little one has an adopted child, a Filipino. They got him as a wee baby. He had a hole in his heart and he had cleft palate. He was a physical wreck. They've had him back and forth to the university hospitals time and again. The last time I remember was a couple of years ago. They had to graft new bone in his mouth arch to give a place for the permanent teeth to stand. Anyway, they're wonderful people, and with the little foreigner in there balances it up. They are just a wonderful group. This is Scott and Roberta. They're both graduates of the University of Iowa, she in nursing and he in commerce. And he has a job with a computer chip company at Colorado Springs, and they live in a beautiful home in a little town of Monument, and not far from Colorado Springs. And they will be here this coming week on a trip back to see their relatives. She has parents here, and of course, anyway, it'll be great to see those youngsters. I haven't seen them for a couple of years. They're growing, you know. And
you had mentioned the fact that if you were a Mills, you better know how to play cribbage.
that's right. You want to be able to defend yourself. This chap that I told you about, this pre-med student in Iowa, he loves to go and visit his grandpa and grandma there in Iowa City on a weekend, and then they bring him up here and we play cribbage.
Ralph, we weren't going to show this, but it's such a nice picture. We got to show this.
I gotta see
This
it.
must have been a family reunion.
Could I
Put
get
it right in your lap. Oh,
Put it right
Oh,
up. You don't
Is
have
this
to
too-
name them all. You
All right.
talked about them over here, didn't
all
you?
right.
Yeah.
You tell us when you're ready.
Yeah.
that's fine right there.
Right there?
Yep.
Well, Rose and Bob are here, and I sneaked over into that corner, and this is all their grandchildren. That whole group. That's 8 of them.
Is this quite a recent picture?
It's fairly recent. I think within the last 2 years.
So this is 4 generations we're
Yeah.
talking about here.
See, I'm 1. Rose is 2. 3, 4 generations, wasn't it? Yeah, and they're the same people I told you about that live in northern Iowa and Washington D.C. and Colorado.
If you had your life to live over again, Ralph, would you have done anything different? Or was there anything you didn't accomplish that you wished you could have?
That's a big question. I wouldn't be able to answer that honestly because I don't know what's out there.
Did you ever think you'd like to fly a plane or?
Oh, not really. I never even thought in terms of flying a plane. A car would be my big one. On that first plane I didn't see, that guy flew from Grinnell to LeGrand, 20 miles, and back. That was a tremendous feat to fly a plane that far.
I want to ask your thoughts on what happened on September 11th of last year when the World Trade Center was blown up by the 2 airplanes. What thoughts went through your mind when you had a chance to contemplate that?
Well, I'd have to think about that, maybe too long, but I think my major reaction was that the world is getting so corrupt that it may be past the point of recovery, and I'm still worried about that. I know, just in my own personal acquaintanceship, I know most everybody is just marvelous people. I love them. I have friends in them all. I belong to social groups that meet regularly, and I have so many very good friends. I think the world over has the same basic foundation of good people. They've kind of lost control of, now, education, for instance. You can't discipline children the way we think we should to get the right product. I think our laws have gone to the left. I guess left and right. I'm right. It's gone too far to the left. One other thing. I think that all of the horror stories we read and see on the TV that are regular grist, our media thrive on that because people want it. And people pay for it, and that's what draws the stories. Mm-hmm. If a story of a decent thing happening, the one where the men were trapped underneath and were brought out, that was an exception. A wonderful exception of a good story that was made front page. Mm-hmm. I love that. We don't have enough of the old time, it's an old time religion, but old time concept of good and bad.
Do you have any family members living? besides you?
One sister, my sister Marjorie Vandervelde. Marjorie lives in Emmitsburg, Iowa. I think the book says she was born in '08. You can figure out how old she is. Anyway, Marjorie was a farmer's wife, a widow. She built herself a nice home on the lake front in Emmitsburg and has lived there a long time now. And she is a professional writer. That's another thing you might be interested in. Writers proliferate in our family. And she's one of the good ones. And Marjorie has a regular newspaper column that has for years, "From My Porthole" is her title. And she'll talk politics, she'll talk religion, she'll talk anything current. She'll reveal the stories of her kids. She has 3 sons. And I have a whole reef of her cutouts. Not near all of them, but a lot of them. Interesting reading.
Unless you have any other memories to share with us, Ralph, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much. But before we close, you have a tapestry up there on the wall that I would like to have Alan train his camera on. You could tell us the history of that tapestry,
Okay.
and then we're going to close with a piano piece played or composed or played by your sister.
That's right.
Which sister was it?
Ursula Johnson.
Okay.
She's my oldest
Okay.
sister.
Okay. Alan, if you would play on the tapestry up there.
Alrighty. This wall hanging I have was produced by my niece, Connie Confer. Connie was an Iowa State graduate in home ec and taught at Red Oak, Iowa, where she met a young farmer and married him. He was a livestock guy, so they ended up living in Wyoming. And Connie was interested in creating the fancy work and stuff like this. She went to Denver and she got a whole bunch of family pictures and had them transferred onto squares of cloth. Brought them home and sewed them into a what do you call it?
Quilt?
A pattern or a...
Into this hanging. Anyway, she made this that takes pictures of old family scenes of people. My daughter when she was little and when she was grown, and anytime. Well, I've had it at shows where they showed all kinds of fancy work and all that in mass, and invariably the people stop and congregate at this one. And so it has its merits besides being, and people coming in the room, the minute they come in, if it's a lady, her focus is on that wall hanging. It's something unusual and has taken a lot of prizes.
Ralph, we want to thank you very much again for sharing your memories with us.
Thank you, it's a pleasure. I wish I could get louder.